I suppose disliking this video right off the bat and commenting how I'm stupid for not understanding the actual genius of Tenet is the more convenient option for you, but I highly recommend you at least watch the full review before doing so. Now, I know there is a whole subsection of self aggrandizing smug bastards who think that their taste in art is superior to the low vermin, and I'm definitely one of them. Like, seriously, if you think that Christopher Nolan is the best movies can get, I highly recommend you watch more movies. Nevertheless, I also find the constant censuring of Christopher Nolan a little unwarranted. After all, it is watching Nolan's movies that made me interested in cinema as an art form in the first place. Like, yes, just because someone is popular among the mainstream audiences and has found financial success not common in a certain artistic field doesn't reflect on the quality of the work they create, but it also doesn't make them sold out hacks either. There is no shortage of high caliber features in Christopher Nolan's filmography that is worth the appreciation it has received. Whatever your thoughts on him as a storyteller are, there is no denying that he has accomplished more in the creative as well as the monetary facet of filmmaking in the last 20 years than most filmmakers do in their lifetimes. Looking back, his and his team's achievements are all the more impressive considering that his career progressed simultaneously with the gradual deterioration of blockbuster cinema in Hollywood that paved the path for the current state of Hollywood. Franchises, universes, sequels, prequels, spin offs, lazy writing, cliched stories, over reliance on CGI, unnecessary comedy that takes you out of the movie, a genre that will continue on being exploited till every cent that can be possibly made is made. Minions, Martha, shaky cam, quick cutting that gives me seizures, lack of substance, lack of style, casting terrible but bankable actors, Disney. And that's not even half of it. So, yeah, in simple words, I'm a Christopher Nolan fan. So, you might be thinking, why did he hate Tenet? Well, first and foremost, let me clarify that I don't hate Tenet. 7 out of 10 is actually a pretty good score. I would say I consider this one of Nolan's weakest films, if not the weakest film he has directed. And when you really think about it, a 7 out of 10 being the weakest 1 out of 10 is pretty impressive. Also, I would like to point out the word disappointment inherently implies that I was let down by something and therefore I was looking forward to that thing. So, no, I'm not on some anti Nolan crusade as some may think. Also, in this review that will shortly commence, I'll be comparing Tenet with Nolan's other films to get across certain points, but in no way is my opinion on the film shaped by my opinion on other films. Now that I've clarified that, let's go to the actual movie, Tenet. I guess I should start with the positives since I've established already that I liked the film in general. If I were to grade this film purely on the basis of the spectacle, no joke, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. What they were able to show on screen, combining practical effects, stunt work, and some CGI, is simply incredible. And maybe except Inception, Tenet has the best action set pieces out of all Nolan movies. And that's saying something. Also, the way in which the scientific elements that the movie was exploring was utilized to create spectacle, tension, and entertainment was pretty clever. I was concerned that the music would be mediocre. This is Nolan's first movie without Hans Zimmer, and I was worried that either Ludwig Göransson would either try to replicate Zimmer's work in his collaboration with Nolan, or he would just do something radically different than what the film needed. But, to my surprise, he actually reached a perfect balance wherein he challenged a bit of Zimmer's style, but also did his own thing. Plus, Travis Scott's song is pretty cool, and that a part of it was used during the convoy ambush in the movie was great. The acting was solid, especially Robert Pattinson. My lord, I love this guy. Please recover, dude. The world needs you. John David Washington and Elizabeth Debicki were good. Kenneth Branagh was. Listen, I like Kenneth Branagh, but holy crap, dude. We'll get there. For now, let's just say that he did a good job considering what he was given. The rest of the cast was whatever. They didn't matter, they were just there. Anyways, I have always been in awe of Chris Nolan for constantly testing the limits of what can be done technically in the form of cinema, and in those terms alone, Tenet was another strong entry. The cinematography from Hoyte van Hoytema was brilliant. From Interstellar to Dunkirk and now Tenet, these two have become a good duo, and all the IMAX stuff that they pulled off was incredible to witness. Oh yeah, before I forget, the cheese grater. Spoilers, by the way, probably should have mentioned that beforehand. That shot of John David Washington annihilating that one henchman's face with the cheese grater. One of the most oddly satisfying moments of violence in the movie. I also think it's clever how the title of the film is the number 10 from each side, which is essentially the 10-minute long temporal pincer moment climatic scene. I don't know if this is true, but someone on Reddit claimed that in the final scene, the music they play for the blue team is the same as what they play for the red team but reversed. Again, I cannot confirm the veracity of this claim, but if true, it's just really cool, man. Indeed, there is a great deal to appreciate, and I'm sure I'll find even more to like on future viewings. But if I had to sum up very briefly why I was ultimately disappointed by Tenet, it would be exactly that. It's just really cool, man. Do not worry, for I'm going to elaborate. Alright, listen. If you're going to talk about the flaws in Tenet, it is kind of a necessity to start with the awful sound mixing. Yes, it really is that bad. I saw this film twice, once in IMAX and then in digital. With the second experience, it was a little better, but without the IMAX experience, the visual thrill of it was less effective. And in IMAX, while the film retained its experience, I couldn't understand a solid 75% of the dialogue. Yes, I get that your goal is to create a vivid sense of being there in that scene, but that just comes off as more of an excuse for incompetent handling of sound than a genuine stylistic choice. And even if it is that, then there is no shortage of ways to get around that. Give us subtitles. There, solved. There's no, there's no need to even look for other options. There was a similar issue with Dunkirk, but I personally didn't mind it there because the movie was less about the plot or characters and more of a simple and straightforward storyline where the action was the core of the film. Even if I couldn't properly perceive a lot of the dialogue, I didn't care because that's not why I was there in the cinema in the first place. All this said, not being able to understand what your characters are even saying is not exactly the best outcome you want when the film is a convoluted science fiction film with more exposition than not. Speaking of, exposition is another one of the major criticisms that Nolan gets as a storyteller, and that really frustrates me. I'm not denying that Nolan relies quite a bit on exposition as a writer. It's just not by definition a bad thing. Exposition, like any narrative tool, can be used for good if incorporated well. Inception and Interstellar by themselves are pretty hard to digest to begin with. Now, imagine following them without any exposition. Anyways, when it comes to Tenet, the problem isn't that there is exposition, it's that the exposition is just executed very poorly. It isn't done with any cleverness and serves more as a way to fill in the gaps between action scenes. You want an example? Oh, look, we've had the car chase scene inverted and it was pretty awesome. Now, before the corridor fight scene inverted, let's have 10 minutes of exposition dump where Nolan doesn't even try to enhance the characters or explore any themes, which is all the more disappointing because that skill of his has always been the most fascinating thing to me about him as a filmmaker. The way he has proven himself time and again a master of balancing character, themes, and blockbuster enjoyment. I'm pretty sure that he just skipped the writing process for this one and jumped straight into the production because there is no other reasonable explanation for why some of the script aspects of the film are as mediocre as they are. The writing for Tenet in general is pretty weak and is the source of a lot of the gripes I have with it despite liking it in general. So let's go over them one by one, shall we? Before that, something real quick. No, I'm not going to unexpectedly do some sponsored bullshit. It's just a disclaimer of sorts. I'm going to be comparing this film to Inception a lot. It's not because I'm unfairly putting it to the same pedestal or something. My opinion of Tenet is completely unrelated to my opinion of Inception. It's just that the comparisons and contrasts will help me better get across my points. Anyways, back to the meat. No, Tenet isn't difficult to follow because we're all dumb. It's because the script is all over the place. It's convenient to dismiss my criticism as they just don't get it. However, at some point, no matter how much we all like this film, we have to reach a common ground that Nolan did not give a single shit about writing when it comes to this one. Feelings toward this film are no indication of intelligence one way or another. But there is a major difference between being challenging and being confusing. Inception is a challenging film that is also an exhilarating puzzle box to decipher for the audiences, and yet it manages to be that while being extremely tightly scripted and fairly simple to follow even on the first watch. The structure of Inception is actually pretty straightforward. Real world, dream layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, limbo, and back. And even if an audience member didn't catch this on the first watch for any reason, they'd still have a general idea of what the film is going for. Unfortunately, that does not apply to Tenet. Not only was this one unnecessarily convoluted, it could have been refined to something more than just an excuse for cool action scenes. Because that's essentially what this film is. Like I said before, the scenes with mostly dialogue are, I suppose, non action scene. It's just a setup for the subsequent action scene, which is fine if you put in any effort whatsoever to make those non action scenes interesting or memorable. But no, why bother? If you think I'm being harsh, you're correct, and it's not because I have some anti Christopher Nolan agenda, it's precisely for the opposite reason. It is natural that I would be all the more upset and taken aback by the indifference towards one of the most important parts of filmmaking from a filmmaker whose work I love. Like, when I'm thinking of The Dark Knight, Sure, the truck flip is incredible, and so are all the explosions, but what comes to my mind is the interrogation scene. I'm thinking of Joker confronting Harvey Dent and simply having a 3 minute long chat. I'm thinking of the two boats given the ultimatum of blowing the other for survival and how it plays out. I think you get my point. Without any of the in depth examination of society, philosophical questioning, character study, the movie is kind of a nothing. Even Heath Ledger's Joker would be a waste of talent had there not been strong dialogue to support it. When it comes to Inception, a sci fi action thriller more akin to Tenet stylistically, there is an actual logical progression where things move along smoothly and sensibly. The plot builds up on a sturdy foundation, and boy, is the ending satisfying. With Tenet, it all just feels like an excuse for visual show off. None of the dialogue scenes are least bit interesting. They're just there so that we can call this movie a movie. Otherwise, it's but a series of cool looking action sequences. The screenplay in general felt like it lacked a soul. Everything was super rushed, none of the characters except Kat had any motivations whatsoever. Nolan's writing is also often criticized for being idea centric than character based, which I find ridiculous, and even in something like Inception, we have a basic understanding as to why Dom Cobb is doing what he is doing. While we know little to nothing about most of the side characters, it is Dom's motivations and backstory that we connect with, and that's what makes us want to see him succeed. There is none of that for the protagonist. Like, I'd at least understand if it weren't done well, if that meant that it was done at all, but it isn't. There's one thing for a character to be mysterious or ambiguous, and an entirely different thing for there to be no character at all. If not for John David Washington's charismatic performance, this is one of the worst characters of Nolan's filmography. Neil didn't have much going for him outside of his role in the main mission, stopping Sator, but I didn't mind it at all because Robert Pattinson is one of my favorite things in this world. Like, I recently watched The King and The Devil all the time, and they were fine films, but legit, the only reason I saw them was for Robbie, and he was there for like 10 minutes each. Mind you, those 20 minutes were fantastic, but still, he should have had more runtime. As a matter of fact, he should just be in every movie ever. The character of Kat was, she was fine. Her character was fleshed out at least a little bit, and the acting from Elizabeth Debicki was pretty neat as well. I don't have much to complain. Kenneth Branagh, the man of the hour. Listen, I love this guy, but he just went full out of control here, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it works, but here it didn't for me. I mean, out of all the characters, he probably had the most personality, but that personality was sometimes so exaggerated that it was kind of funny at times. I almost feel bad in admitting this, but that scene where Sator just loses it and beats Cat up, I was trying my best not to laugh. It was so badly written, and the whole thing just came out of nowhere. And while the music in general is pretty great, the BAM sounds on the repeat were not the best option to go with. Come on, guy, the storyline is the emotional pillar of the film and supposed to be anxiety inducing, not unintentionally comedic. As for the other characters, they're just there. Sir Michael Caine is there for exposition. The Indian guy is there because I guess they need him to pull off some crazy plan they come up with. The Indian lady is there for exposition. Fleur Delacour is there for exposition. Quicksilver, the MCU edition, is there because I guess they need him to pull off some of the crazy plans they come up with. Listen, I don't want the most top tier character writing. Just give me something. On a related note, I should also mention real quick that the dialogue wasn't great. I couldn't hear most of it, but the lines I could comprehend belonged in a cheesy Roland Emmerich disaster flick, not here. I think this is the point in the video where I finally acknowledge what you should have realized by now. This review is really all over the place, and somehow, it's still easier to follow compared with Tenet. If you didn't want to bother with the writing, that's okay. Just hire a couple screenwriters with an above average track record, sit them down and explain to them the concept and have them write it for you. That would still be better than what we got. Speaking of structure, I really think it was a missed opportunity for this film to not end at the opera where it began. For all my grumbling about messy writing, this film still has some structure. We're moving forward, then we're moving backward, then we're moving forward again. Hey, look, that's pretty cool. But since we get to see all of the key action scenes inverted once we go backwards, it would have been cool to do the same thing with the opera instead of some barren, ugly place showing up in the movie for the first time. Sure, our expectations were subverted, but what's the point of subverting expectations when it's not improving our experience of the film and instead worsening the film's quality? There's one last thing I wanted to mention before I end this goddamn thing. According to Chris Nolan, the James Bond franchise was a significant inspiration to him when it comes to Tenet. A lot of the fans are defending the minimal character work, saying that Bond films are pretty much the same. First of all, this is not true. Casino Royale has one of the best emotional story arcs for a protagonist ever to put to film. And even if we were to look at the older Sean Connery or even the more recent Pierce Brosnan films, the cheesy writing suits the overall campy tone. Tenet felt really tonally inconsistent to me for that very reason. It wanted to be a cool, slick 007 popcorn adventure, but also a really serious drama. Like I said, Nolan has proven himself a master at balancing tone. The Dark Knight, a film that is championed for its realistic take on an otherwise famously unrealistic genre, still has corny elements, but the thing is, those never take away from the more dramatic parts of the film. The Bond inspiration, in my opinion, simply did not reflect in the final product. I'm not one of those idiots working for some dumb journal whining about quote unquote the lack of comedy. I know this wasn't meant to be a comedy, and I'm glad Nolan didn't put any silly, unnecessary jokes at points where they didn't fit. It's just that if you're making a Bond-esque film, there should be a fundamental self-awareness and charm in the writing, which was completely absent in Tenet. At the end of the day, the Bond homaging felt more of an excuse for insufficient writing than a genuine incorporation of passion. Anyways, that was my brief rage about the film. You might be thinking I was too harsh on this, but allow me to remind that I gave this a 7 out of 10, which is actually a pretty complimentary score when you think about it. The reason I'm upset about certain parts of the film is that these things could have been easily fixed with some rewrites or just giving someone else the job. And of course, my frustration is all the more amplified because this is a work of an auteur I respect to an unhealthy amount. Unhealthy because, like many others who are unwilling to see the flaws in this film, I too am forgiving of some of the things in the Christopher Nolan film, blinded by my appreciation for his general craft. But if there's something you wish to take from this video, I hope it is that if we want someone whose work we like to continue succeeding consistently, then it would be rather destructive if we keep lying to them and ourselves that they're doing everything right when that's not the case. Look at what happened to George Lucas, J.K. Rowling, M. Night Shyamalan. No, I don't think Chris Nolan's career is over. He has made more great movies within the last 20 years than majority of filmmakers do in their lifetime. This is a single setback, that too not entirely. But all I'm saying is that when the mistakes are there and are clearly degrading the quality of the film, then they should be called out because the last goddamn thing we need right now is for Chris Nolan to stop caring about stuff that makes half of the cinema experience and what has made his films fascinating to me since my childhood. The dialogue, the structure, the characters.
Yeah, and the sound mixing, of course. Yeah.